The small town square glowed as if lifted straight out of a holiday dream, its cobblestone streets lined with twinkling lights, evergreen garlands draped over lampposts, and wreaths hung proudly on every shop door. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the night sky, adding a soft sparkle to the scene, while children laughed and darted between the glowing stalls that sold roasted chestnuts, hot cocoa, and candy canes. Carolers stood at the heart of the square, their voices weaving a melody of Christmas cheer that floated into the crisp winter air. At the center, a towering Christmas tree stood dark for now, but decorated with countless ornaments that shimmered under the anticipation of being lit. The energy of the crowd pulsed with excitement, everyone waiting for the mayor to begin the countdown that would ignite the tree into brilliance. Through the festive crowd walked a young woman, her hand gently brushing against the curve of her rounded belly beneath her thick winter coat. She was radiant, glowing with the natural warmth of pregnancy, yet her smile carried a hint of unease. Her heart longed for this evening to be perfect, a cherished holiday memory she could share with her husband and soon-to-arrive baby. She imagined them standing together, hand in hand, faces illuminated by the golden lights as the tree came alive. That vision filled her with excitement, but an undercurrent of doubt lingered, whispering reminders of her husband's recent distance, the way his mind seemed elsewhere, the moments when he had pulled away as if lost in thought. She shook her head gently, unwilling to let worry spoil the night. Instead, she focused on the laughter, the music, and the dream of togetherness. With hope rising in her chest, she made her way deeper into the square, searching for him, ready for the magic to begin. As she wove her way through the glowing crowd, the wife placed a protective hand over her belly, her thoughts soft and tender. The child within her was more than just a blessing, it was the promise of a new chapter, one she had always dreamed of sharing fully with her husband. In her mind, she pictured the three of them together in the coming years. Cozy mornings with the baby giggling in its crib, family dinners filled with laughter, Christmases even more magical with a little one rushing to the tree in pajamas. These thoughts made her heart swell, filling her with the warmth of love and the belief that family was everything. Yet as much as she clung to these hopes, there was a part of her that ached with quiet uncertainty. Her husband had seemed distant lately, distracted, as though his mind wandered somewhere she could not reach. The late nights at work, the hurried phone calls that ended when she entered the room, the way he sometimes avoided her gaze, it all gathered in her mind like scattered shadows. She told herself it was just the stress of fatherhood weighing heavily on him, perhaps nerves about the changes that lay ahead. Still, the doubts crept in when she least expected them, whispering questions she didn't want to ask. Did he still see her the same way now that her body had changed with pregnancy? Did the glow of their romance still burn as brightly in his heart as it did in hers? Tonight, she silently vowed, would be the night to chase away those fears. The Christmas tree lighting was more than just a holiday tradition, it was a chance to stand side by side, to feel the magic of the season wrap around them, and to remember what had always tied them together: love. She longed for him to take her hand, to look at her with the tenderness she once saw so easily, to remind her that even in the middle of change, she was still his world. As she stood among the shimmering lights and joyful voices, hope stirred stronger than doubt, and she prayed that tonight would rekindle the warmth she so desperately missed. The truth of her husband's distance lay buried beneath layers of guilt and temptation that he himself struggled to control. In quiet flashbacks, the memories replayed vividly, how his closeness with another woman had started innocently, just small conversations over coffee at work, a laugh shared too often, a smile held a moment too long. But what began as harmless companionship slowly deepened into something darker. He found himself drawn to her energy, her boldness, and the way she made him feel young and reckless again. Every time he should have walked away, he stepped further in, blind to the consequences, chasing the rush of a thrill that dulled his fears about responsibility and fatherhood. Yet guilt clung to him in every quiet moment, especially at home when he watched his wife cradle her belly, humming softly to the baby they were about to welcome. He knew he was betraying more than just vows, he was betraying the very foundation of the life they had built together. But guilt was a heavy weight he buried under excuses. "It's just a phase," he told himself. "I'll end it soon." Still, the allure of stolen moments with the mistress continued to pull him back, weaving him deeper into a trap he barely realized he was walking into. For the mistress, though, this was never just about passion. Behind her painted smile lurked ambition. She wasn't satisfied with whispered promises or hidden encounters. She craved validation, attention, and control. The Christmas tree lighting presented her with a perfect opportunity, a stage set for the entire town, a spotlight ready to capture more than just festive cheer. If she could position herself at just the right moment, she could expose the secret they shared in a way that would shatter his carefully maintained world. Her mind raced with possibilities, calculating every detail. While the husband wrestled with guilt and denial, she plotted her moment of triumph, fully intent on turning the night of joy into a night of shock, one that his wife would never forget and the whole community would whisper about for years to come. The festive hum of the town square grew stronger as the couple arrived together, though the wife couldn't help but notice how her husband's demeanor felt slightly off. His steps were hurried, his eyes darting around as though searching for someone in the crowd, and though he tried to cover it with a faint smile, she caught the stiffness in his jaw, the distracted air that clung to him. She told herself it was just nerves, perhaps the pressure of the crowd or the anticipation of the grand lighting, but somewhere deep inside, unease stirred again. Around them, the square glowed with magic. Strings of golden lights draped from the rooftops, their reflections shimmering against the falling snow. Children skipped along with candy canes in hand, their laughter mingling with the sound of carolers singing a gentle, harmonious hymn. Vendors served steaming cups of cocoa and gingerbread cookies, the warm scents mingling with the crisp winter air. At the center of it all, the massive tree towered, covered in ornaments of red, silver, and green, its star at the top catching even the faintest glimmers of moonlight. The crowd buzzed with excitement, waiting for the moment when the mayor would announce the countdown and bring the tree to dazzling life. Beside her, her husband shifted again, squeezing her hand but only briefly, almost mechanically, before letting it slip away. She felt the absence immediately, the emptiness where his warmth should have lingered. She looked up at him, searching his face for reassurance, but his gaze seemed elsewhere, lost beyond the crowd. A faint knot formed in her chest, a tension she tried to shake off by focusing on the joy around her. Still, beneath the sparkling lights and the festive melodies, she couldn't silence the growing sense that something was quietly unraveling between them. The mayor stepped forward onto the small stage, his voice booming through the speakers as he greeted the crowd with cheer. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to welcome the magic of Christmas." The square erupted in applause, the energy lifting higher as people pressed closer to the tree. The carolers' song shifted into a jubilant rhythm, their voices swelling with the promise of celebration. A ripple of excitement moved through the sea of faces, children bouncing on their toes, parents lifting them onto their shoulders so they could see the towering tree. The wife, standing in the midst of it all, felt her own heartbeat quicken. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the countdown to the lighting, the very thing she had dreamed of sharing with her husband as a memory they would carry into the future. She slipped her hand into his again, but this time she noticed something unsettling. His grip wasn't steady. It was loose, almost hesitant, as if he was distracted by something far more pressing than the dazzling spectacle about to unfold. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but she swallowed it quickly, forcing herself to smile, to believe that perhaps he was simply nervous or overwhelmed by the crowd. The mayor raised his hand, and the crowd grew louder, voices echoing as they began to count. 10, 9, 8. The sound was thunderous, echoing against the buildings, mixing with the laughter of children and the music filling the air. Yet beneath the joy, the wife couldn't ignore the knot tightening in her stomach. Her husband's gaze seemed fixed beyond the square, searching, waiting for something she couldn't see. As the numbers fell closer to 1, she clung to hope, but deep inside, she knew. Something about this night was about to change forever. The mayor lifted both hands high, his voice rich with cheer as it carried across the frosty square. "It's time, everyone. Let's count it down together." The crowd erupted with enthusiasm, their voices overlapping in a chorus of joy. Children squealed and waved tiny glow sticks, their excitement contagious, while couples huddled closer against the cold, faces glowing under the festive lights. Snow drifted down in gentle flurries, each flake catching the golden sparkle from the decorations above. The anticipation was electric, spreading from person to person until it seemed the entire square pulsed with holiday magic. The wife squeezed her husband's hand, hoping to feel the warmth of connection in this perfect moment, but instead, his fingers slackened in her palm. It wasn't the firm, steady grip she longed for. It was loose, almost absent, as though his mind was somewhere else entirely. She glanced up at him, her breath catching in the chill air, and noticed the way his eyes flicked nervously toward the crowd rather than on the tree. Her heart sank, a tremor of unease cutting through her excitement. 10, 9, 8. The voices rang out in unison, louder and louder. The sound of carols swelled behind them, the music blending with laughter and cheers. The wife tried to shake off the gnawing feeling in her chest, telling herself not to overthink, that maybe he was only nervous or distracted. Still, something in his demeanor felt wrong, a hollow silence between them that didn't match the joy bubbling all around. 7, 6, 5. The energy surged, lights flickering in preparation, the square glowing brighter. She tightened her grip as if to hold on to him, but even in the middle of the crowd's jubilation, she felt it. The creeping sense that the magic of this night was about to twist into something she never expected. The square erupted in cheers as the final numbers of the countdown thundered across the night. 3, 2, 1. The mayor's voice rang out, and with a triumphant flick of the switch, the massive Christmas tree blazed to life. Thousands of twinkling lights shimmered across its branches, ornaments glinting like jewels, the star at the top glowing so brightly it seemed to kiss the night sky itself. The crowd clapped, children squealed with delight, and carolers raised their voices higher, filling the square with the triumphant sound of holiday joy. For one fleeting moment, everything felt magical, exactly the way the wife had imagined. But then, almost as if the universe itself had conspired against her, the brilliance of the tree was matched by another light, a spotlight that shifted suddenly across the crowd. At first, she thought it was aimed at them, her heart skipping with the hope that her husband had planned something special. She turned to him with anticipation, ready to meet his eyes. But the truth unfolded in a cruel twist. The beam didn't fall on her. Instead, it caught her husband, and another woman standing far too close to him. The noise of the celebration faltered, replaced by the sharp intake of collective breath. Murmurs spread quickly, gasps rising from the crowd as everyone watched in disbelief. Before the wife could even process what she was seeing, her husband leaned forward, his arm slipping easily around the mistress's waist, and pressed his lips against hers in a kiss that felt deliberate, brazen, and public. The world seemed to shatter around the wife in that instant. Her body went rigid, her heart slamming against her ribs as though trying to break free. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her mind screamed at her that this wasn't real, that she had to be imagining it. But the stares of the crowd and the whispers of onlookers told her otherwise. The festive music still played faintly in the background, but it sounded warped, distant, drowned out by the roaring in her ears. She stood frozen under the glow of the newly lit tree, snowflakes melting on her skin, watching the man she trusted, the father of her child, betray her in front of the entire town. At first, her body refused to respond, as though her mind had disconnected from reality. The kiss played out in front of her, her husband's lips pressed against another woman's under the harsh glare of the spotlight, and she stood rooted to the ground, a statue amid the sea of gasps and murmurs. Then, like a dam breaking, the shock gave way to a flood of raw emotion. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and uncontrollable, blurring the glittering lights of the Christmas tree until they became cruel smears of color. She lifted a trembling hand to her mouth, but it couldn't hide the sob that escaped, sharp and broken. Humiliation burned across her cheeks. She could feel the eyes of the crowd piercing her, sympathy from some, pity from others, and judgment from the rest. Her entire world, her marriage, her hopes, her vision of family, was being dismantled not in the privacy of whispered arguments but under the watchful gaze of neighbors, friends, even strangers. The woman she had trusted to stand beside her was suddenly alone, abandoned in the cruelest way possible. Inside her head, a chorus of memories replayed, the vows they had spoken on their wedding day, promises of loyalty and love, nights when he had held her close and whispered about their shared future, the tenderness he showed when he first placed a hand on her pregnant belly and smiled. Each memory now felt poisoned, twisted into a cruel reminder of how deeply he had betrayed her. The physical weight of it all pressed hard on her body. Her breath grew shallow, her chest tight, and she instinctively placed both hands over her swollen stomach, as if to shield the baby from the storm raging within her. The stress surged like a violent wave, her knees weakening beneath her, her heart racing too fast. A painful knot twisted in her belly, not yet dangerous but enough to remind her that she couldn't crumble completely, not when she carried more than just her own shattered heart. Still, as the tears streamed down and the crowd's whispers swelled, she felt herself unraveling, piece by fragile piece, under the unbearable weight of betrayal. The once joyful hum of the square shifted into a low, uneasy murmur as the crowd processed what they had just witnessed. Where moments ago there had been laughter and cheer, now there were sharp whispers, gasps, and the unmistakable rustle of outrage. People turned their heads, some pointing discreetly, others not bothering to hide their disapproval. The betrayal had not just wounded the wife, it had tainted the entire celebration, souring the magic of the night. Elderly couples exchanged sorrowful looks, shaking their heads in disbelief. For them, the sanctity of marriage was sacred, and to see a husband disgrace his pregnant wife so openly filled them with a mix of anger and pity. Mothers shielded their children's eyes, or tried hurriedly to explain away the scene, but the little ones only looked on in confusion, too young to understand the depths of betrayal yet sensing the heaviness in the air. Some children asked questions in innocent voices, tugging at their parents' sleeves, only to be hushed quickly. Gradually, the community's stance became clear. Murmurs shifted into quiet condemnation of the husband's shameless display. Words like disgraceful, cruel, and heartless rippled through the crowd. Others clucked their tongues in sympathy for the wife, their eyes following her tear-stained face, their hearts aching for the image of a woman abandoned at her most vulnerable moment. Though no one dared step forward to intervene, the atmosphere spoke louder than actions. The square itself seemed to close ranks around the wife, silently offering her the support and compassion her husband had so ruthlessly withdrawn. When the lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, the wife found herself standing face to face with her husband, the shock in her veins now hardening into something sharper, demand for the truth. Her eyes, still red from tears, locked on him as she choked out the words. "Why? Why would you do this to me, here, in front of everyone?" Her voice trembled, but beneath the pain there was steel, the weight of a woman betrayed beyond repair. The husband shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could form an excuse, the mistress stepped forward with a smirk tugging at her painted lips. "Maybe it's time she knows," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with triumph. "He's been mine for longer than you think. Tonight wasn't about her, it was about us." Her hand slid brazenly toward his arm, a gesture meant to claim him, to assert victory in the cruelest way possible. The wife's chest tightened, her hands curling into fists at her sides. She had imagined betrayal in whispers, secrets hidden in shadows, but never so shamelessly paraded before her. She turned back to her husband, her voice breaking as she demanded, "Is this true? Do you love her?" Caught between the two women, his face paled. Guilt gnawed at him, yet selfishness rooted him to the spot. He hesitated, his silence screaming louder than words. His weakness hung in the air like poison, and in that moment, the wife saw clearly, whatever love once bound them, he had already broken beyond repair. The wife stood frozen for a heartbeat longer, staring at the man she once trusted with her whole heart. His silence, his weakness, and the smug presence of the mistress told her everything she needed to know. There were no explanations that could undo the wound, no apology that could mend the shattered vows. A single tear traced her cheek, but this time, she didn't break. She breathed deeply, her hand resting protectively on her belly, and found strength in the life growing within her. Without another word, she turned away. The crowd had mostly dispersed, but a few onlookers still lingered, watching her with quiet sympathy. She ignored their whispers, ignored the sting of humiliation still fresh on her skin. Her steps crunched softly against the snow, each one steadier than the last. She wasn't walking away just from him, she was walking toward something greater, the promise of protecting her child, the dignity she refused to let him strip from her, and the resilience she never knew she carried until this very moment. Love, she realized, could never survive without loyalty. And if loyalty was gone, then so was the love she had once fought to believe in. The truth was bitter, but within it came clarity. She deserved more than betrayal, and her child deserved a mother who chose strength over despair. As snowflakes swirled around her, her silhouette disappeared into the night, framed by the glow of Christmas lights. Alone but unbroken, she carried herself forward, stronger in her solitude than she had ever been before.